Welcome back to the Arch Advocate Show on this 4th of July Eve. Yes, it's the eve of 4th of July, when Santa Claus comes down your chimney and gives freedom to the good little boys and girls and gives a ticket to the breadline to the bad little kids. It's the 4th of July tomorrow, folks, and apparently somebody's planning a war. All right, let's get right into this, folks. Now look, before I jump into this, let me point one thing out that's very clear. As it is that we are going through a time of transition as a nation, there are certain milestones that have already been reached. Right? There's no going back. Right? Like if you have a dispute with somebody or with a group of people. Right? You go and you sit down with them, you talk it out, you work something out, you get some lawyers involved, you sign some paperwork, and it's over. Right? No bloodshed. Right? And most, in the civilized world, most things go down that way. They go down with no bloodshed. Right? Well, in this time of transition, blood has already been shed. It's already happened, so there's no going back to the time when that had not already happened. It's in the books now. So now, even if there was no more bloodshed and this thing gets resolved over the next weeks or years or whatever, we cannot say to ourselves, historically, as the history books are being written right now, nobody's ever going to be able to say this was a time of transition that resulted in zero bloodshed or even zero loss of life. And people have already died. Now, there's something that I don't want to be an alarmist here. There's certainly rumors of wars, right? Wars and rumors of wars. Does that sound familiar? You know what I'm referencing there? There's rumors about wars. Now you have to, if that's the case, then you need to, try to cast your mind like in a military light, right? You have to be strategic, you have to be prepared, and you also have to know your enemy, right? If you know yourself, you know your enemy. If you know your enemy, victory. Like there's an actual book called The Art of War, right? And the number one rule is to know your enemy. So you have to try to put on the mind of your enemy, all right? You have to keep in mind that these people that are in power, they have absolutely no interest in giving up that power. These are not the type of people who are going to look around themselves and say, wow, this is really destructive. A lot of people are going to get hurt. I better stop with my antagonization, right? I better stop antagonizing these people that have different political ideologies than me, or else there's going to be people that die. They're not doing that, and they're not going to do that. These people are in power, and they want to keep it that way. There is no remorse in these people. There will never be a time when these people are going to see the error of their ways and repent. It's not going to happen, right? These people are going to keep pushing, and whatever power that they have left, they're going to exercise that power to try to be victorious. Right? They see this as they see people who enjoy freedom, believe in small government, right? That believe that the bigger that a government gets, the more corrupt it gets. People like that, right? People like you and me, we are the enemy to those people. We are, in the mind of those people, we are the ones who are holding back the progression of societal evolution. Right? And they want us killed because there's no other way. Now we've already seen Hillary Clinton up on stage laugh, making jokes about putting people in camps. Well, what's strange about that is that it's like, well, that's not funny. How is it that you think that's funny? Right? There's a great deal of truth in what she said. Right? There's a great deal of intent in what she said. She's up on stage making jokes about putting people in camps, and people are laughing. It's like, why is that funny? You're talking about taking your political adversaries and putting them off into camps. Well, what's strange is there's actually a book that was written 2,000 years ago that talks exactly about that, right? So it's like, this isn't a laughing matter. You don't make jokes like that. One, because it's not a joke. Two, because you already have the infrastructure to do that. There's already camps built. And three, you already have a history of doing that. Mankind already has a history of doing that. And the United States has a history of doing that. We have camps right now in Guantanamo Bay. And we have, we have put Japanese people in camps, listen, that's obviously a very touchy subject, the Japanese internment camps. Like, first of all, nobody died, right? We didn't take them to camps and then kill them, right? Secondly, that was a time when the United States had just been attacked, and people get weird when they get attacked. You know what I mean? They do irrational things. Right? I mean, that's just how that goes. And so, like, these people, they're in the same mentality that the government was in, after the attack of Pearl Harbor. It's like, oh, let's just get rid of these people. We don't know, we don't know what they're capable of. Right? Like, these are people who are right now realizing that the whole world is not with them. Right? That there is a strong contingent of people like me, free people. There are people people like you and me who are saying, I'm never going to give up my freedom. I'm never going to be silenced. I am never going to put myself in a position where I am vulnerable to attack. I'm never going to let you come into my house and look through my stuff. You're not going to come and take my children, right? There's already a huge campaign. Like, and this isn't, again, conspiracy theory versus conspiracy fact. It is a fact that the government has subsidized the taking of children to the tune of $40 billion a year in our country. And there are people right now that are speaking up about that. Like, that's a real thing. And if you're listening, like, look, however this war goes, believe me, your kids are on the chopping block. Right? They have no problem with the idea of coming and separating you from your children because you have ideologies that differ from theirs. And they will say, well, that's an abusive parent, and we need to protect that child by separating them from their parents. You cannot let that happen. You cannot let that happen. You do that, and you live the rest of your life on your knees, right? And there may come a time very shortly that you might have to make that decision. Am I going to live, to whatever degree of comfort? Am I going to do that on my knees, or am I going to die on my feet? You might be faced with that decision. That's a tough one, right? That's a tough one. You're going to have to think about that. You have to think about which one you want to do, because listen, these people, again, we've seen it all the way to the very highest level of government, right? Look at what these people are doing now that Hillary Clinton didn't win. Look at what they're doing, right? You look at, the truth about Barack Obama is coming out. There's no higher office on the planet than the Oval Office. And these people have been sitting in that office for a very long time. And believe me, listen, I'd like to sit here and make excuses for George Bush, but I can't, man. He's one of them. Right? John McCain, he's one of them. And these people have also convinced, because they were in the highest of offices. These people have convinced other people, like the head of the FBI, for example, to turn on the American people, and the NSA, right? The National Security Agency, to turn on the American people and to spy on the American people. Those are no longer conspiracy theories. They're facts. They are facts that people conspired against the people of the United States. Those are facts. Now, not all of the FBI is full of wicked people, or the NSA, or Homeland Security, or your local police department. But listen, anytime you get a group of people together, there's going to be bad people, right? Is there any group of people that you can cite where it's like, well, there's a certain percentage of those people that are just going to be evil? All right? It's actually called sigma in mathematics, right? And you can even see it in the church, right? Now, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a Christian, right? I'm in a country right now where I can't go to church because there's no English speakers around here. But, you know, the thing is you can go to church and find evil people on the platform. You can see religious leaders saying that God told me that I need to have a new, $300 million jet or $30 million jet, whatever. It's like, no, he didn't. Right? You're seeing priests and pastors being found out for raping children. Right? There's evil everywhere. There is no group of people that you can join where there won't be evil people. Nowhere. But it doesn't mean that everybody in that group is evil, right? Right? It's as it is impossible for everybody in the FBI to be evil. It's also impossible that everybody in the FBI is good. And the same thing goes for our armed forces, right? I served in the United States Marines. I love the Marine Corps, right? My beloved Corps. But the fact is like I know that there's people in the Marine Corps that are evil and do evil things and would easily and gladly deprive you of your freedom if there was a medal or a ribbon in it for them. So you must be very careful. And I'm not saying stress out about it or panic about it. Quite the contrary. I'm saying get to know who's around you. Find out. Those policemen in your local area, those are good, hardworking people that have a horrifically complex job, right? But not all of those people are going to be good. You don't know if the police chief in your area is good unless you know that person, right? We just saw, the sheriff of Broward, right? Was he the sheriff? The guy from the guy with the Lamborghini. We just saw, we're seeing how evil that guy is, and how quickly he would endanger the citizens of his area for money, so that he could get a Lamborghini, right? You have to beware. You have to beware and get to know these people and let them and get together with some friends and come together and you go to the sheriff's office, you go to the police office and the police station, or go to their picnics or go to the ball or whatever, donate to them, and you should do that. And sit down with those people and let them know, like, hey, look, if you ever turn on the citizens that you swore to protect, there will be bloodshed. And we're ready, right? You cannot ever turn against the people that you swore to protect, because it's clear now. There's no more speculating about like is everybody in the FBI good people? Is everybody in the sheriff's office, are they good people? It's clear now that it is at least a possibility that the people who are saying that they are there to protect you, that some of them might not be. Some of them might be more concerned about feeding their own family than they are about your freedom to feed yours, right? And that's where the human condition comes in. This is where spirituality comes in. Pragmatic spirituality is one of the things that we talk about on this show. There's a very spiritual thing that happens to a sheriff who says, yes, I will take money from the federal government to not report crimes so that it looks like my crime statistics have gone down, so that I can get that money so that I can drive a Lamborghini. There's a spiritual thing that happens in that transaction. It is a transaction. There's economics to it. There's economics to spirituality, right? Man says, oh, the government's going to give me money if I shield the actual math, if I shield the numbers, right? If I distort the balance, right? And what does the Bible say about that? The Lord hates an unjust balance, right? If you lie about the balance, right? If you have an unjust balance, God says, you know what? I hate that. And now we can see it. Sheriff Aaron, whatever his last name was, the guy from the Lake, Parkland shooting. He said, okay, I'm going to take money to throw the numbers off so people don't actually know how much crime is going on in my county. And if I get that money, I'm going to buy a Lamborghini so that it makes it look like, man, we're really successful. And the net result of that was a bunch of dead kids, because that kid, Nicholas Cruz, the cops had been called on him many, many, many times. The FBI investigated him several times. And because there was that cover-up, that kid was free to go shoot up a bunch of other kids. That's evil. You see the tie between economics, which is very, very practical, right, and evil. You see that? So as we move forward, like, look, for example, there are rumors that tomorrow will be the start of the Civil War. Now, I don't believe that, right? I don't believe that, but at the same time, I do believe that there will be some violence tomorrow. I believe that there will be loss of life tomorrow because of the kind of rhetoric that's coming out of the left. Now, here's the thing. This was just the other day. Ohio man arrested for attempting to assist a foreign terrorist organization after plotting attack in downtown Cleveland on July 4th. That's tomorrow. All right? Demetrius Nathaniel Pitts. Try to say that 3 times without a lisp. Demetrius Nathaniel Pitts. That's what his mama named him. But he also goes by, or AKA, Abdur Rahim Rafiq. But wait, there's more. Also known as Salah ad-Din Osama Walid. But his mama named him Demetrius. 48 years old, of Maple Heights, was charged in U.S. District Court with 1 count of attempting to provide material support to Al-Qaeda, a designated foreign terrorist organization. Pitts was arrested Sunday by members of the FBI's Joint Team Terrorism Task Force. So, win for the FBI. See, I told you they're not all evil, right? I'm sure most of the FBI and most of the NSA and most of the sheriffs and policemen and hall monitors and everybody, I'm sure that 95% of them are good, right? And thank God. Thank God for the FBI in this case. Like, literally thank God. Like, close your eyes for 5 seconds, not if you're driving, but say, hey, Lord, thank you. Thank you that these men and women of the Joint Terrorism Task Force were successful. Because if they weren't, that guy would have detonated some bombs tomorrow in Cleveland. Right? Cleveland rocks. That Cleveland. The arrest and charges were announced by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, FBI Director Christopher Wray, Assistant Attorney General for National Security John Demers, U.S. Attorney Justin and the guy from the Cleveland office. According to the affidavit filled in the case, between 2015 and 2017, Pitts had expressed anti-American sentiments and expressed a desire to recruit people to kill Americans. It's like, wow, man, for 2 years this guy was saying that? You know what I mean? And see, here's another thing, too. Let's just talk about that. The problem with demons, now, all right, there's something I have to explain to you, all right? There's a lot of shows that you should be watching. There are a lot of podcasts that you should be listening to. Everything by Jordan B. Peterson you need to watch or listen to. Maybe you drive a lot, right? Maybe you're a long haul trucker. Maybe you're just you got the kind of job where you spend a lot of time on the road. You need to listen to everything Jordan B. Peterson has to say. You need to, just to get a sense of how it is that there's so many different kinds of people on the planet. You ought to listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, or watch it on YouTube like I do. That's a really good one. There's, Dan Bongino. You need to listen to that. Tim Proyce podcast. You need to listen to that, right? There's a lot of different voices that you should be listening to. If you're going to watch Fox News, look, I like Tucker Carlson. I've made this clear before. I like Tucker Carlson. I like a lot of stuff that goes on over at Fox News, but there's one major thing that I don't like that I can't get past, right? That I can't, you're never going to hear me saying, you should be getting your news from Fox News. or anybody else that on cable news. And I'll tell you why. Because the format is ridiculous, right? You are not meant to be shown points of view in 7-minute increments or 3-minute increments, right? Again, I'm a big fan of Tucker Carlson. In fact, you know what? I'll make a video today. I'll put it out on Tucker. Like, hey, Tucker, man, I love you, buddy. All right? I'm a big fan of your work. But the thing is like this form that we've been adhering to since the beginning, right? The news has always, since the invention of television and the invention of radio, this is how the news has always been broken down to us in these little blurbs, right? And then they have somebody on that will have a controversial point of view or something that I disagree with. But then they bring the guy on and then they just yell at each other for 3 minutes. They cut to commercial and that's the end of that segment. It's like, dude, you cannot learn that way. There's no way that you can form an opinion in that form. It's impossible. And what's better though, what's actually very awesome in all of this is that with the success of podcasting, right, both on YouTube and audio podcasts, is like we are learning that not only do people have an appetite for the way it should be, right, 3-hour-long conversations. That's how it should be. Isn't that how you do it in your home? Right? If you want to get to know somebody, you have to get to know them. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of work. It requires patience. It requires discipline. So with the advent of podcasting, or invent, we now find that people in the civilized world, they have a huge appetite and an almost unexhaustible tolerance for 3-hour conversations. Why? It's like, well, because that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to be. I don't want to see, that kooky guy from Michigan or whatever who talks like that. He's got that weird way that he talks. I don't want to see 3 minutes of him. I mean, to be honest, I don't want to see that guy at all. But it's like, dude, if you've got something to say, and he's like a congressman or something, or a governor or whatever, it's like, dude, let me hear what you have to say. Let me hear it in long form. And let me hear, like, when you're asked questions about your stupid position, let me hear you answer. I need to hear your answer, because even if I don't come into agreement, at least I can say, like, now I know how that crazy person thinks, and I know why he thinks it, and now I am better prepared to defend myself against it. You know what I mean? So what I was going to say is, like, listen, you need to be getting as much information as you can, and I would recommend taking your news from, the podcast that I mentioned, or Tim Pool. Tim Pool is an actual journalist, which there aren't very many of those guys left. There aren't very many people, or you know what? Who else? Beg your pardon. Let me look this up. Is Charlie Leduff, Leduff. I would imagine that's pronounced Ledoux. Leduff. I don't know. But that guy's a journalist, and he's got all the awards to go with it. It's like, listen, journalists they're a dying breed. There's not a lot of people who go put their feet on the ground, where the news is happening. He's one of them. So what I was going to say is, like, you get into all these different podcasts and all these different sources of information, and you're going to find everybody has their own particular slant. You know what I mean? They have their own thing. I recommend getting into InfoWars, right? And all your friends are going to be like, oh, Alex Jones, isn't he the guy about the gay frogs? It's like, you know what? It turns out, you look into that. You look into that charge when people say, like, oh, he's just a conspiracy theorist. He's talking about the government's making the frogs turn gay. It's like, you actually look into what he was actually saying. Yeah, he's an over-the-top, boisterous kind of guy. But if you look at what he actually said, I don't think it's going to lend to sleeping well at night. There was substance behind that. But anyways, what I was saying is, I come at this from a very different point of view. I have, over a decade of working in finance, so most of my, the filter that this information, when it goes through my brain, it first goes through an economic point of view, right? It goes through an economic filter, and I look at it that way. It's just like, well, what's the economics of this? Like, for example, Mexico just elected a socialist as their president, and the first thing that came out of his mouth was, all right, everybody, we're going to invade America. Right? He said, everybody go bum rush America and go make a home there. Right? So, I mean, number one, like, it's like, okay, Mexico's already overrun by the drug cartels. Now their supreme leader is a socialist, which means 5 years from now, Mexico's going to be, Venezuela on crack. It's going to be way worse. And so we're going to have a lot of people south of the border that are going to be in a very bad mood and trying to get into the United States. That's a problem. We've got to build that wall quickly. But again, I'm kind of straying. The second filter that information goes through my brain is a spiritual one. Right? And going to qualify this, because I do talk a lot about evil, and I talk about demonic influences and that sort of thing. And I understand that these are very difficult things to explain, and I'm going to lose a lot of people in the process, because it's, the way it hits the ears, it sounds like nonsense, right? And believe me, I walked away from the church because of people talking about stuff like that, and people, the traveling prophets and all the money involved and whatever. It's like I just said, you know what, I've had enough, and I walked away from it all. Literally, like, I put on shoes and a backpack and I walked across about a third of the surface of the planet. When I did that because I needed to find out if there was truly a God or not. Because I was so confused, having been raised in the church and realizing, like, oh, none of these things that these people are talking about, none of these people have any firsthand experience with it. They don't. They say it. They believe it. They're hoping for it. But it's like, well, you pretty much just go to church on Sunday and then go live your life, and then you come back on Sunday. It's not like you have any personal, like, real experience with any of this stuff. Nobody can ever give an explanation of, like, well, if God talked to Moses, why won't he talk to me? Right? If Jesus could heal people, why are there no Christians that can heal people? Right? Why have I seen so many of my friends have their children die of cancer? Where's the healers? Right? Those are tough questions. And just like most men, you don't start asking the real questions in your life until you get to be in your mid-30s. Right? That's a very natural, some people call it midlife crisis. I would call it just being old enough to ask yourself the real questions, and that's where I come from. In that place is, I struck out, on a path with a backpack on my back, and having taken no money because of a prescription that Jesus gave. Don't take extra clothes, don't take any money, don't take any books, or a script. And I walked across the United States, Europe, and Turkey. And along that journey, I came to certain realizations, and I came into a relationship with the Almighty that is very personal to me. And there are ways that I see things now because of that experience that forever I will never be able to see it any other way, right? And when I see people that are using the government and using federal taxpayer dollars to separate children from their parents for profit, right? You might call it whatever you call it. You might be an atheist, right? You might call it really bad policy or whatever. Well, what I call it is demonic. I see a power that is in the universe that is menacing at work. You want to get into the argument of, like, well, are these independent, free-thinking, autonomous beings that have horns and tails and whatever? It's like, well, I don't really know. All I can tell you is how I see it. And I don't get into the arguments of, like, what they actually are or, whatever. But I can tell you that there is something of an intelligent nature, at least, that is doing things that are evil. And the fact that, people have been getting murdered who have been trying to expose that, look, the government has $40 billion a year that they use to separate children from their parents. Like, that's demonic, right? When you have the new president of Mexico, who is a socialist in an already overrun nation, right? They've already been conquered by the drug cartels. And now this guy, the first thing he comes up, he says, listen, we're all going to bum rush America. That's demonic. That's going to start a war and people are going to die. Do you understand that? Like, you can sit there and think like, oh, that's just some guy in Mexico just spouting off rhetoric. It's like, oh, no. Words are powerful. Everybody who heard the new president of Mexico say that out loud is now thinking it. Do you understand that? People that are in the United States who have now suddenly found their righteous indignation against what happens on our borders when children are caught and families are caught crossing the border. Like, I mean, number one, it turns out that there is a huge child trafficking ring that's going on down there, which is demonic. Demons do that. Demons attack children. Demons attack the innocent and not the weak, but like the unable. Right? Because that's what demons are. Their hallmark is weakness. They themselves are weak, and therefore the only thing that they can peddle is weakness. The only damage that they can do are to people who cannot defend themselves. You shouldn't, listen, if you grew up in the church and like you have that sort of, old school Christian fear of like the devil and demons and whatever, don't be. Don't be. Number one, Satan, right? The great Satan, he was defeated. He's been defeated. He's already lost. He's a loser. He is the cosmic loser. And all of his minions, they're all weaklings. That's why, like, when you hear demons talking, right? And you can go to all kinds of different news clips recently of like Democrats moaning, like literally moaning with their voice. That the Supreme Court justice guy left the bench, or that day when President Trump won the office and that one lady was like screaming. It's like that noise. Have you ever noticed how peculiar that noise is that they were making? That's the language of demons. It's like the language of weakness and the language of nonsense. That's what they sound like. They have their own language and it's nonsense. They have their own they have their own weaponry, and their weaponry is weakness. It's literally nothing to be afraid of. But you need to be aware of it. You need to fight it, but not be afraid of it. You know what I mean? Because we're on the side of strength. Our hallmarks, our weaponry, it's strength. It's sound-minded. You know what I mean? Our weapons are precise speech, right? We don't speak nonsense. They speak nonsense, right? Like that girl, you see that, and I'll do a funny little thing later about, that socialist girl in New York, that 28-year-old girl who just won. Like, you look at pictures of her, and she's just got that weird, that weird look on her face, that socialist. It's like, she's out there talking nonsense. Like, oh, we're just going to give free college to everybody. And we're going to give free houses to everybody. It's like, well, Kate, number one, you're a congresswoman now, and your powers they only work in your district, and you have this one little district, right? So that's what you're congressionally in charge of, right? You're talking about in your district. You're just going to make it so that people in your district can go to college for free, and people are going to get housing for free, and that guaranteed jobs. It's like, well, what jobs are in your district? What jobs do you have in your district? Are you Detroit? Do you have, are you a industrialist, safe haven? Like, do you make cars? Do you make furniture? Like, what do you do in your district? And furthermore, who do you think is going to pay for it? Free doesn't mean free, sweetheart. Like, somebody has to pay for it. Who's going to pay for it? Oh, the rich people. Well, what if the rich people just move to the next district over? You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Like when they speak, it's nonsense. Socialism is like the economic plan for demons. You know what I mean? It's nonsense. It doesn't make any. You know what I mean? You can sit there and say, "Well, I want it to be free." It's like, well, I want puppies and kittens. I want the world currency to be hugs. You know what I mean? It's like that's not how it works. You can't just say stuff. You know what I mean? You know. And by virtue of you saying it, then it becomes true. I had a conversation with. I have a very leftist friend, and he's still a friend because on that walk across the planet that I had mentioned, I met him in Spain. Now he lives in New York and he's a lawyer. He graduated Duke University and got a full ride scholarship, so he's very he's smart. But we were talking. This was. When Bernie Sanders was running for president, and that lady, when they were doing like a town hall or some sort of debate or whatever, and this lady stands up and says, "Listen, I own a handful of Fantastic Sam's, haircut places, whatever, and I have 50 employees, and you're telling me that I have to pay for healthcare for all of them, and I can't afford that." And Bernie Sanders just looks at it and says, well, listen, you have 50 employees. You're rich. You have 50 people working for you. You have to pay for them. But it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. He's up there thinking that just by the virtue of him saying that it's going to somehow make it possible. And I was talking with my buddy Sam about that. And he was like, yeah, man, she should have to pay for that. And it's like, wait. She just told you. She owns several different Fantastic Sams, right? She's not making private jets. Every one of her employees, she has to pay them. And how much does a haircut cost at Fantastic Sam's? $30? How long does it take to perform a haircut on a woman or with a man with a lot of hair? 45 minutes? So it's like basically you're making $30 an hour, that haircut lady. But she doesn't get to keep all of that. She's got to give some of that to the owner lady. But the owner lady has to let her keep enough of that money so that she can live and feed her family and pay her rent and pay her student loan bills, all that stuff. And I was like, Sam, you don't seem to understand it. It's like just because she has 50 people who work for her, right? Just because she writes 50 different payroll checks every Friday or every other Friday, that doesn't mean that she can afford that. We don't know what her financial situation is. All it is, these people think like, oh, well, you have 50 employees, therefore you must be a Rockefeller. It's like, no. She sells a very inexpensive product. And when she sells it, she has to let the actual salesperson, in this case the haircut person, she has to let them keep most of the money. And then she has to pay for the rent in the building that person sits. You know what I mean? So these people, they're just like, well, it should just be free. No, you've got 50 employees. Obviously you can afford it. It's like, dude, just by you saying that doesn't make it so. Right? It's nonsense, and that's the language of demons. And this girl from New York, she's like, oh, just free college and free housing, and everybody's going to have a job. It's like, okay, how? Who's going to pay for it? The people of your district, the people who live in your district that are rich? Well, what if they move to New Jersey and make the drive across the bridge every day? And then what are you going to do? Right? And that's why Democrat, socialist economic policy, it always wreaks havoc. You go look at Detroit, right? You go look at Sheila Jackson Lee's district, and you can see what socialism does to a community. It ruins it. It rapes it. Because their whole thing is, I'm just going to tax the rich people. And guess what the rich people do? Since they have so much money, they pick up stakes and they move outside of that district, and they move outside of that state, and they take their hard work and their money elsewhere. And the next thing you know, you've got third world situations going on in the United States. That's demonic. That's the end result of demonic influence, is complete devastation and weakness. Right? So as we look forward to tomorrow, July 4th. All right, happy Independence Day, everybody. Let's take some time to remember that this isn't about drinking beer, and barbecuing hot dogs and hamburgers. This is the day that we became independent of tyrannical rule. And there's people in our country right now that want it back. They want the state to run everything. And who knows why? Who knows what actually goes through their minds? But it certainly isn't good Christian values, right? Whatever it is, it's not good. And you know, as we celebrate, keep in mind that there are people who are planning violence tomorrow because they hate America and they hate the independence and the freedom of the United States, and they're going to attack. So beware. Just keep your eyes open. You know, 99% of keeping bad stuff from happening to you is just be aware of your surroundings. So have a good day, right? If you have children, teach them about what this day is about, right? And if you don't know, you can Google it, man. There's actually really cool stories about the 4th of July. And I encourage you to dive deeper into the history of this day that we celebrate tomorrow. So, happy 4th of July. Be safe out there. And remember, there's people who hate you because you are free. That's it for today. I'll talk to you tomorrow.